All right, so I think that we're ready to start. Hi, my name is Noelia. I lead the youth team here in UNDP, in the United Nations Development Programme, based in New York, in our global team. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you. We have a very packed agenda. We will have a panel and then some quick updates from partners and colleagues before opening up for a Q&A. We really want to have enough time for a conversation with you guys. And worry not, if we do not have time to address some of the questions, we will also answer every question in writing. So to get us started, I would like to give the floor to Adriana Dinu, who is our Deputy Director for the Bureau for Policy and Program Support here in UNDP, and a big champion of climate and of youth. So without further ado, Adriana, please you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Noelia. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar on young people powering climate action. I like the strength of the verb, powering climate action. This webinar is convened on week 4 of the Global Youth for Climate Consultation, which currently UNDP is hosting on its Sparkblue platform. This will take place until Friday, and it is in collaboration with colleagues from youth networks, from UNICEF, the Youth Envoy's Office, and many more. From the bottom of my heart, a warm thank you to all speakers and participants who are joining us today. Young people who are passionate about climate issues and about planetary health. Bold activists from youth organizations, movement and networks, committed students, inspiring youth practitioners, young people from the newly established Secretary General's Advisory Board on Climate Change, as well as fantastic UNDP youth and climate experts and other colleagues from around the world. I'm in awe of all of you and of your passion. You have consistently reminding us that the COVID-19 crisis is the moment to redesign our collective, greener, more just and more sustainable future. As we know, this pandemic has the potential to shift incentives to act in ways that were not on the policy, on the legal and regulatory table before. These actions that were taken now could lead to larger shifts or tipping points which might reshape the trajectory for development over the long run. And one of these tipping points is related to climate and nature-based transition. Better responding to youth aspirations and enhancing youth leadership are fundamental priorities to recover and truly transform our societies. I have worked my entire professional career and witnessed in environmental issues, in climate and biodiversity, and witnessed firsthand the central role played by youth in leading actions in nature, in climate and energy. My concern today is almost the same as I had when I started as young conservationist working in the field in Central America, in Africa, in Europe. Youth is still excluded from key decision-making. Youth still faces risks when raising their voice. Youth positive contributions in their communities often go unrecognized, undervalued, and insufficiently supported. But youth has the opportunity and the strength to power for the entire world the climate action. And that's why at UNDP, we really value your expertise and experience and want to further enhance youth agency and youth-led partnerships. In today's panel, you will hear from young advocates and from UNDP colleagues working to fulfill our flagship initiative, our promise, the climate promise, the promise to the world that we are going to support over 100 countries in enhancing their ambitions on national determined contributions or climate pledges. We are currently working with 114. You will learn also from youth inclusive and youth-led actions from our colleagues in Argentina, in Vietnam, in Nigeria, in Brazil. As you know, a green economic recovery that we are all hoping on is not going to happen automatically. Progress on climate change will depend significantly on policy choices that we are making in the next 6 months. So as we're celebrating tomorrow, the International Youth Day, under the theme Youth Engagement for Global Action, please allow me to wish all of you a happy Youth Day. And please, we rely on you to power the climate action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Adriana, for these very powerful and wise words to get us started. Fantastic. So we will now move to the actual panel, and we will hear first from two young leaders, Marie-Claire and Paloma, before moving to our colleague Rebecca, who will introduce the Climate Promise that Adriana just mentioned, so that you can get a sense also of how UNDP is approaching this issue. And after that, we will hear from a mix of UNDP colleagues and also our colleague Shia Gozi, who's a young leader from Nigeria, who also has been involved with the NDC process and with global action on climate. So without further ado, I would start with the next slide with giving the floor to Marie-Claire Graf, who has co-founded the Sustainability Week International in Switzerland, and who's also playing a very particular role at the global level at the moment, coordinating together with her colleague Hita, Yungo, this massive global movement for climate action in the context of the COPs and beyond. So Marie-Claire, you have the floor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for the short introduction. And now we can change the slide. I was asked to talk about, especially about the opportunities and the challenges young people are facing when interacting or trying to make a difference when it comes to climate action. And very quickly about me, I'm really passionate about supporting the ocean and the frozen world, because I'm coming from Switzerland, where we have a lot of mountains and a lot of frozen areas with the glaciers, and of course they're under threat at the moment. So I dedicate a lot of my time to try to make a difference there. Next slide. As you all know, the climate, of course, is warming up. Next slide. And that's why it's my personal goal to save the Earth. And this is, of course, a very big challenge. Next slide. But I dedicate a lot of my time to really try to make bold climate actions. And there, of course, young people have a very, very crucial role. Next slide. I myself committed myself some years ago to try to take everything what is possible, and maybe even what I think is impossible to do, to try really to make unprecedented, bold, impactful, positive, meaningful, and risk and ambitious actions for all the SDGs. But as I've mentioned, trying to focus as much as I can on the climate, because I think the climate angle is an underlying leverage for all the SDGs. And that's also like how I was invited by Noela to talk in particular about some of my engagements and trying to show what young people can do, and also how important it is to have an intergenerational approach, basically having people from all different age groups included. Next slide. As already been mentioning by Noela, I am currently the focal point for Younger, the official children and youth constituency to the UNFCCC, basically the international space for young people working on climate. So we are supporting young people and facilitating their engagement with the UNFCCC. And as you can already imagine, this is a huge opportunity, because we can basically be there where the decisions are taken. And now comes the dark side of it. Unfortunately, we cannot take any decision because the UN is a party-driven process. So young people are not included in the decision-making at the moment. And this is, of course, a big challenge we are facing, because a lot of young people are full of ambitions, as we mentioning already before by Adriana. So a lot of young people are coming there with a lot of hope that they can change something. And then we are sitting in the second row and we can listen to these endless discussions and it's not moving forward, and this can be enormously frustrating. After my first COP, I said, I swear to myself, I'm never ever coming back here because it was so frustrating. And I didn't get any word, by the way. So, but yeah, here I am, I'm still involved, currently as Younger Focal Point, and really trying to make this space even more open for young people, and yeah, trying to have as much meaningful inclusion as possible. And this is leading me to the second point. Next slide. So one of the ways how young people can be meaningfully included in the decision making and sitting at the table is if they are managing to get in the official party delegations. And I had the enormous pleasure last year to be mandated by our president in Switzerland to be part of the delegation of Switzerland, and was also mandated to follow as lead negotiator several topics. And this, of course, gave me the incredible opportunity of representing my country and being part of the decision making in this international space. Unfortunately, this is not happening everywhere around the world, and even in Switzerland, it was the first time they ever had a young person on a decision-making and negotiation mandate. Nevertheless, I think it's a huge opportunity of bringing more young people, training them and bringing them into the delegations, because at the end, these delegations have to incorporate the view of everyone and also young people. And a lot of young people are coming directly from the university, so they have enormous knowledge, they have enormous passion and drive. So it would be a pity to not include young people in delegations. So one of the big opportunities is, I would suggest bringing young people into decision-making processes and really also giving them the mandate. Because if you only take young people to the COPs and then just let them speak at the side event, it's really nice, it's really great. But yeah, I wouldn't say that this is the most meaningful engagement young people can bring to the table. And for this, it's very important. Also, Youngo is supporting these youth organizations and trying to prepare them and make them able to one day, hopefully sooner than later, be able to join the delegations and make decisions. Next one. Of course, another form is to be outside of the negotiations, because I think the outside pressure is also really, really important. Of course, we have to be inside at the table, but also we have to keep up the pressure. And for this, climate strikes, Friday for Future movement, but many other movements around the world are incredibly important. I started the climate strikes in Switzerland after I have met and talked to Greta quite a lot at COP24. And I think it's incredibly important that everyone is joining these climate strikes, not only young people, because at the end, it's a movement of people of all ages, all backgrounds, all religions, all races, whatever, because yeah, the problem is of course concerning us all. Next slide. Next slide. Very important is as well on the next slide that young people are not only they have to be included, of course, in decision making, but also I think it's very crucial and important that young people are able to make decisions when it comes to their own education, because of course the education is a fundamental part of what young people are concerned. And unfortunately, climate and the SDGs and everything is not included in the current curriculum, or at least not enough. So many young people never heard about all of this. Maybe they catch it somewhere in the news, but this is of course not enough. Because our countries signed the Paris Agreement, our countries are supporting this international negotiations, and hence also they have to educate the young people in the schools. That's why I started with some friends a Sustainability Week. First we started in Zurich, then we grow it to Switzerland and now internationally, to give young people the opportunity to engage with the SDGs and make them aware, and also increase their capacity when it comes to the climate agenda. So it's also really important that young people have a say when it comes to their own education. Next slide. Talking a little bit about different opportunities. Oh, okay. Then there is no other slide. But then I quickly say something about the opportunities. Young people are luckily more and more invited to talk at the international, on the international events, and are more and more I can see that young people try to listen, but nevertheless the system is not ready yet, which is a pity that young people are sometimes invited to speak, but then there is no proper follow-up. So I think one of the opportunities is that young people get more attention. The challenge then is, how do we follow up? How do we take their inputs into a meaningful conclusion? As well, I think a big opportunity today is the internet, social media. Young people very often know very well how to handle it. No offense, a lot of older people also learn about it and gradually picking up. The Sparkblue, I think, is a wonderful platform, how we can do a very meaningful engagement. So there is a big opportunity in using all these digital tools to reach out to more people. Nevertheless, the challenge then comes with not everyone has yet access to the internet. There is, of course, a big challenge when everything is communicated in English. Sparkblue has an amazing tool to translate, but yeah, English, not everyone understands it. So yeah, there are challenges. Of course, we also have to use the traditional medias, newspaper, television, radios, as this is, of course, reaching also a broader audience, especially because in the internet it's sometimes hard to validate information. Yeah, and I think one of my last point, the last opportunity I see is really engaging with our world leaders. For this, all the UN events are an amazing space because basically you're in the same rooms and you can easily engage with them, because at the end, our president, ministers are the ones who are taking at the moment decisions for us. So we as young people have to make sure that we engage with them and that we tell them very directly and straight to the point what we want. This is also how I started, and that's also how I then ended up, very luckily, to be included in the delegation. And it's my personal aspiration and goal to prepare more young people to be able to serve in the official delegations and hopefully make decisions sooner than later, because yeah, time is running out. And I'm just ending with that it's very important that we have a good intergenerational dialogue, that older generations are more open to listen to young people, despite we sometimes have crazy ideas, and that young people are more open also to talk to the people who have been working for so long in the institutions and might be a little bit slow in our way, but they also bring a lot of experience to the table. And with this, I'm handing over to Noelia.
Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. Really heard your powerful call to do everything that is possible and also the impossible. Thank you for highlighting the importance of formal participation as part of delegations at global level, but also everything that can be done outside of the room and everything in between. Thank you very much for that. Also know your commitment to peer-to-peer learning and to education, and your own commitment to ensuring that more young people can have these opportunities and contribute. So truly amazing. Thank you very much for that. We will move now to Paloma. Very excited to first of all congratulate you for being appointed as a member of the Youth Advisory Group that the Secretary General of the United Nations has just established on climate change. This is truly exciting, and we're really looking forward to hearing more about your work with Engajamundo in Brazil as the national coordinator, specifically working on climate action, engaging with indigenous people in your country. So please, the floor is yours, Paloma, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Noela. Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Paloma Costa. I'm from Brazil. I work here as a lawyer with environmental, indigenous, and traditional rights. In front of all the degradation and deforestation and setbacks in our social environmental agenda. So in these last years, our work multiplied a lot, and when a time where climate action and ambition is needed. Also, as Noela said, I am part of Engajamundo, which is a youth-led organization that was born inside CoP spaces because a group of young girls realized that participation of young people in these spaces were really needed. So they created Engajamundo, and 8 years later, now today, we are so big. We have like 3,000 volunteers. We are in almost all states of Brazil. But one thing that we realized, and nice that this slide up here, is that like where decisions are made, things are really, really, really slow. And on the ground, things are really needed. And now we cannot be waiting for decisions to be made when people are really on the ground needing assistance, needing education. And with these both works that I do here in Brazil, both on Instituto Socioambiental and Engajamundo, I realized and had the capacity to understand how a proper education and how proper access to information is key to make a huge difference when it comes to effectively participating and addressing the climate crisis. You see, people with these ones on the photo, which is part of our recent campaign on the Amazon, where we bring climate education, political education inside these spaces. And we were able to formate, please go to the next slide, this huge group of young people, for them to understand how they relate with the territories, how they can feel the impacts of the climate changes, the impacts of illegal activities in their territories, the impacts of the livestock industry that comes going into their territories as well. So they started relating with this land and understanding how they are part of it and how they are doing a good service for all of us, for all society, by protecting their lands, our forests. And you see, the most creative ideas I have the opportunity to see, and to be honest, I went by bike searching for it here in Brazil, was with the youth in the front lines, in the bases. They come up with so many great ideas and they teach us so much. And us now in Engajamundo, who are like an organization and national organization, we understood that we have to be connecting both youth on the front lines with youth like in capitals, in cities. For these ideas, for these initiatives, comes directly where the decisions are being made. Because people don't go to these places. They are far through inside the Amazon forest. It's not easy to get there. You have to take sometimes like 9-hour bus, then 8 hours in a boat, then like 4 hours in a canoe. It's too much trouble just to get there and hear these amazing, amazing initiatives. I get so emotional when I talk about it, I'm sorry. But yeah, but you know, this is specifically happening, all of this creative, because these groups, they have no option. We as young people, we don't have any option. We have to defend what remains of our forest from all this massive destruction with all we have. And all we have is our life. This is what we can be given to create and have more and more life. You know, recently I was seeing a report made by Greenpeace. They were showing that the #1 industrial meat sector here in Brazil alone, her operations were estimated to produce around half the annual carbon emissions of fossil fuel giants. This is so big. And I just keep thinking like how these industries, how this meat industry comes into these territories. And they have to be there doing all to protect. And this, and while they are planting with the elders, learning their traditional knowledge, their medicines, engaging with all the youth to stay in the communities in the territories, protecting their lands, their collective home, our forests, searching for plants that are capable to be resilient, guaranteeing their food security, food sovereignty. And that's why we know like we have a possible future to come. And to be honest, these are the green jobs that I want to see as a rule and not as an exception. And here is where the subside should be coming, not to these fossil fuel and massive industries that destroys everything. And this is exactly what I want to do in my new position as in the Youth Advisory Group, to bring these amazing solutions, ideas of young people in all parts directly to people who have the power to make decisions, for them to be able to bring and make rules with these amazing ideas, not with these subsides to big industry, to destruction, and to all of this. This week, a woman deputy here in Brazil said that we've been shouting on the streets and now it's time to make everything happen. That's why I like the name Climate Promise, because a climate promise was made to all of us. So now on, I will be everywhere to ask it for it to be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paloma. Each time we hear you, we learn something new about the power of mixing, you know, passion with a smart approach to all these issues, and it's truly remarkable the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for sharing so many powerful words and such wisdom about how to leave no one behind, how to connect the dots, and how to also really place young people at the center and their solutions and their expertise at the center, and not sort of fake environment in which young people might be able to contribute or be seen as decision makers. So thank you very much for this amazing work that you do, and we can't wait to see what you will accomplish through the Youth Advisory Group, and please count on us to support you. So we will now move to the famous Climate Promise, now that we've been talking about since the introduction. So we will hear a bit more about it, so that you can also, for those that are less familiar with it, so that you hear a bit more about our approach, about the countries that are involved, etc. Truly impressive to see that from out of the 114 countries, 86 are specifically prioritizing young people, youth participation, activities led by youth. It's truly a very dynamic space, and we need all of you to make this happen. So the floor is now with Rebecca Carman, who's my partner in crime in all things youth and climate. And who's also managing the NDC Support Programme in UNDP, which is crucial to the Climate Promise as well. Rebecca, you have the floor, and thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Noella, and it's a pleasure to be working with you too. Martin, if we could just move to the next slide. So the Climate Promise, as mentioned, is the commitment of UNDP and brainchild of our administrator to really offer an opportunity for any country that wanted to present a new plan under the Paris Agreement, have the opportunity to do so, to ensure that resources were available, and that was not a reason or a barrier for encouraging climate action and climate change. Next slide, Martin. So hopefully, I think most people within UNDP, I hope, would know about the Climate Promise, because it is really right now one of our biggest priorities in terms of climate change, if not our biggest priority this year, certainly in such an important year, 2020, which is really the first opportunity for countries to be able to submit a new strengthened and more ambitious climate action plan, or NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution, to the UNFCCC Secretariat. As of July, UNDP is now working with 114 governments. So this actually also makes this the biggest offer of support to countries in the world, and we're very proud of that. I think what's really exciting for us as well, certainly within the climate team, is that we have managed through this push from our from the highest levels of UNDP to really bring everyone within UNDP into this discussion and into the support around the NDCs. So not just our climate change experts, but there's Noella from youth, we have water experts, we have nature-based solutions very solidly involved in the discussions, and we're working with a range of really impressive partners as well. So it's, for us, I think, a game changer as well in terms of the way that we're working on climate change and really bringing together a sustainable development side of what we do with our climate change work. Next slide, Martin. And this is important, and why we're really focused on the NDCs right now is because there's a lot of room for improvement, as many of you would already know. But the first round of nationally determined contributions, not only do they not measure up what we need in terms of achieving or preventing temperature rise beyond 1.5 degrees, but a lot of them don't mention youth, or if they do, they mention youth at a very sort of high level without really thinking about a very sort of sustained way to involve them. So only 42% of the first NDCs have these really direct references to youth or children. There is education mentioned fairly broadly, but not necessarily targeting, again, youth or children. And a whopping 23% don't really mention youth or children at all, even though these are the, you know, one of the key groups who are going to be the most impacted. So as Noella mentioned, for us, there really is this big opportunity through the Climate Promise to try and right this wrong and to really have this engagement. And just to mention, these stats come from a UNICEF publication. Next slide, please, Martin. And I think what's really important is that what we're finding, and from UNDP's internal reading of what countries are doing, you know, sectors that they're looking at, there is opportunity still to create the space and to really encourage governments to raise their ambition in terms of mitigation, in terms of reducing emissions, and also to acknowledge that most countries are looking to enhance adaptation, which we recognise is also going to be key. So these are UNDP interpretations of what we're sort of seeing in terms of the opportunities that governments are finding themselves to create ambition. And why is this important? Because I think if there's a group that is incentivized to sort of be in the room and ask for more ambition, it is youth. And I think what's really important as well is what we know about transformational change is that we need early adopters. We need people who are going to change norms and behaviors and be there and push the other actors along. And so I think what we see is that youth is a key change agent for this kind of work, and a key constituency who can change the way we describe ambition and not make it negative the way that it is quite often within the negotiations in climate, but turn that into a positive view. What does this mean? What does a new future look like that is green and that is youth-centered and considers intersectionality? So youth can really be, inspiring this movement as well. And I will just say that I'm very proud that my 5.5-year-old daughter, she sees people with signs, she immediately starts looking for Greta in the crowd, because she's just like, that is a group of climate youth activists out on the street. So I think, just to say you've been seen and noticed, and you can not only inspire older generations, but also the younger ones who will follow you. Next slide, please, Martin. So within the Climate Promise, we have defined a set of entry points where we are supporting the government. First one about sort of building this whole of society engagement, we see as a key success factor to creating the kind of transformational change that is required. We're talking about an upending of a system, and you don't get there without bringing everyone along who will be impacted. So it's critical that youth is at the table for that, but it's also critical that youth is at the table when we talk about key emitting sectors or new sectors that could be added to an NDC and that could have an impact. When we're talking about progress, how can youth be involved in terms of, keeping us all on track? Financing, is there funding that's being allocated in a meaningful way for youth to be able to be empowered to participate and also to have opportunities to contribute in terms of climate action? One of the things that now we are doing is we do have, in addition to these webinars, and this is just one that's going to kick us off, we're having an e-consultation, and we're looking within UNDP to come up with a toolkit that will look at these best practices and barriers that youth are facing, and come up also with recommendations. So this is one of the ways that we want to make sure that we are improving internally and also can help externally. And I think my final point would just be that we also need to recognize that not all youth are the same. We have to meet them where they are, but each, people have different interests, and we can't treat youth as this sort of monolithic block, but we have to look at this in a very nuanced and strategic way and make sure that we are reaching all of the vulnerable constituencies also within this group, make sure that we bring everyone along in this journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Very comprehensive indeed. I mean, the e-consultation was mentioned by Adriana in the opening and also by Rebecca just now. If you want to have a look, this is www.sparkblue.org/youth for climate, and it will be open until Friday. Conversation on how to achieve success, what are the barriers to meaningful youth participation, but also how we can join forces and build new partnerships with youth-led initiatives. So thank you very much. We hope that you can all also remain engaged in our reflection moving forward. As Rebecca said, this is the first COP chat, the first community of practice chat that we organize on Youth for Climate, but we will have a long series of those focusing on different countries. And now we will indeed focus on two country experiences and also on Nigeria. First, we will hear from our colleague Hien from Vietnam. The UNDP country office is part of the Climate Promise and has made great efforts to prioritize youth engagement. So Hien, the floor is yours.
Hi, good evening, good morning. Thank you very much, Noella. It is so inspiring to hear from all the colleagues and speakers here. Thank you also Adriana and Rebecca and colleagues who give a lot of challenge initiative for country office to really take action for the Climate Promise. It's great initiative since last year. So my presentation will be very much focused on what the country office is now doing and why we work with youth in Vietnam for this year in particular. So the next slide, please, Martin. Thank you. So we, next slide, please. So can you move to the next slide, please? So why we work we do what we are doing now. UNDP in Vietnam, we has been working on NDC update and revisions, and we have been working intensively in the last few years, actually 2 years and a half, and Vietnam is going to submit it NDC soon. But during the process, we see that there's a number of challenges in really improving the NDCs from the policy angle, and from the challenge from the government is that they can't really capture well how their actual activity going on with the community, particularly with the youth, where there are some good practice going on in Vietnam. For example, from plastic waste, zero plastic waste initiative, or different community-based adaptation activity. Also, there are challenges also for private sector to engage into that, and we think that the current engagement of having scientists, evidence, and raw data from different sectors to improve the NDC is not good enough for the policy discussion, and we need to bring more. And the second part is, the second reason is that in UNDP Youth Program and also UN program, we try to conduct a survey to prepare for the UN 75. And in the survey, majority of the youth say that they do care a lot about climate change. They really want to engage in the climate change policy as well as sharing their practice. And they also highlighted to us that climate change will be their biggest challenge in the next decades to come. And that is why since last year when UNDP globally initiated a number of activities and launching the Climate Promise, we also started to work more deeper with the youth to work on climate actions with some small initiative. And then when it comes to the Climate Promise opportunity window, we see that, oh, we need to do more. And this year in 2020, we really have to have the youth to capture better what they are doing. So that's why in our program priority right now, for Climate Promise, youth is at the heart of our key work plan. And we will focus on one report for youth and prepared by the youth. It will be prepared through a number of consultation and write-up at the 3 regional consultation, focus on the 4 themes that the youth will be having advantage compared to many other stakeholders like private sector or community. So the report will be called a special report on youth for climate action in Vietnam, with a roadmap for them to really engage in NDC with the government and with the community in the years to come. We are currently now conducting 3 regional consultations, and we have been working and selecting youth through a number of platforms organized by the CSO. So they are the great youth leaders and champions who has been working directly with the community to share the experience. And we focus on the theme and the campaign online, offline for that. Can we move to the next? Thank you. One of the key priorities that a number of youth-led organizations inform UNDP is that they really would like to make sure the process going on with awareness raising for youth. And why the youth in Vietnam, they already know a lot about climate change, they don't know exactly what is going on with NDC. And a number of hard science facts doesn't really help them to understand better. So the process here is really to engage and sharing and simplify a certain science facts and report information through inspiring speakers from scientists of Vietnam to practitioners and also youth leader representative and researcher to share the work of 1.5 degree report, UN report last year on the bottleneck assessment for implementing NDC in Vietnam. And that are the entry point for us also to discuss with the youth about NDC in different ways and different examples. And we hope that by the end of the year, we can deliver the report by the youth, where it can emphasize more on how the youth can help Vietnam to grow sustainably while limiting the GHG emissions, and highlighting the opportunity where the youth can really enter into the NDC implementation plans by the end of this year and next year, and also focus on the area that they can do, and then engage further with the CSOs and the UN and the government in the years to come. Can we move to the next? So this is our timeline, and you can see on the screen, we started, due to the COVID-19, we had delayed a little bit, but we started regional consultation right now. We're supposed to do the first launching first, but right now, due to the COVID, we adjust a little bit the plan. We are now working in the central region, where then we move to the north and the south with the CSOs. And all the CSOs, they are really great leaders who are also working with youth, Obama Foundations, who really already role model for the youth to tell the story. And in September, we're planning to work with Monterey, the Ministry of Environment, for national consultation in Hanoi, including the launching of Mission 1.5. We also have a particular team where young entrepreneurs also will be able to consult and share their view into the report. And then we will gather the best leaders into a camp to write a special report. So we finalize the report in November, and then we move to dialogue with the policymaker by the end of the year. And the next year we are planning to to prepare for some youth leader for some training and preparation for the COP 26 together with the government. So next, please. Yeah, this is some initial finding, and I think it's quite similar to some of the suggestions that the colleagues had mentioned earlier. But right now, few highlights that we learned from few days ago from the Central Vision consultation is that now creative communication will be one of the good tools that the youth now would like to engage to really unpack NDC and climate change and share with their friends and their colleagues and students. And they would like to have more organized platform at the local level. And a lot of them interest in nature-based solutions. It seems that it is very easy entry point where they can work with the communities and with the CHOs to do the work for climate change, and they can see the real impact. And then so wish to work with UNDP to organize more intergenerational policy dialogue or forums to really promote the future vision. Next, please. And I think that is where we would like to see and report further to you by the end of the year how we will share the Youth in Vietnam report. But for the time being, you can also visit our link here to listen to Vietnamese youth on their recommendation last year on the Climate Action Summit. Some of that is also very inspiring. So I hope we can continue and follow later. Thank you.
Thank you, Hien. This is amazing. Thank you very much. I mean, we see the breadth of the activities that you're engaging with. I think it nicely connects with the point made by Paloma on the importance of accessing information as well and contributing very concrete inputs to feed into the national position. Really amazing to see also the work that is being done with the broader civil society, and it'd be great if in the discussion we could hear more about that as well. So thank you very much. We will now move to Chiagozie in Nigeria. Chiagozie is not from UNDP, from Plant for the Planet, but he's been working closely with us on a number of advocacy activities related to climate, also former Yungo focal point, and he's been following specifically also the NDC enhancement process and how young people have been part of that in the country. So Chiagozie, you have the floor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Noella, and thanks, colleagues, for your very inspiring and excellent presentation. It actually leaves me with very little to say now. Maybe we'll move to the next slide. Yeah, just the next one. So I'm just going to start up very quickly. Rebecca already gave the overview globally of this stats. This stats I got from the Brookings Institute study that shows us, how much the NDCs that are currently on, I mean, the first NDCs of member states reflected youth engagement within them. Of course, about 42% mentioned children as vulnerable groups, and you see how much they are seen as stakeholders. Only 4% mentioned children or youth as stakeholders, and that shows a lot where our work lies across board on how to upscale this to make sure that young people who have more years to live on this planet are able to be important stakeholders in this engagement. And of course, the post-COVID-19 recovery process means that the NDCs should be more ambitious, because we've seen practically things that could happen if there's political will, and if we're in difficulties. They are really happening now. Economies are shut down, flights are not going. Money is, the resources are being pumped in to revive the economy in diverse ways. So there are some excuses that will not be acceptable again when we are more ambitious in our NDCs and demands going forward. Next slide. Okay, so now we have like a global overview. Of course, this is from the World Resource Institute, a global overview of what is happening with the NDCs now. We have 11 countries that submitted already. I think one of them, Rwanda, is the one from Africa that has submitted. Some of these have more ambition and new text included in them. Others have just a recycling of the first NDC or just a resubmission of the previous NDC with no ambition. And this is something we should be able to avoid, especially with how UNDP is engaging across over 100 countries. If they're able to push through, we can have more ambitious NDCs across board. Next slide. And then in Nigeria, the NDC enhancement process is currently ongoing. There's so far little or no public engagement. So far, of course, maybe too early to say. But that's why also we are trying to take the initiative ourselves to take it to the ministry to say, oh, you have to engage young people. There are also other groups that are calling on the government to engage, the public in these NDCs across board. There are partners who are ready to support. And currently, the Nigerian NDC, the first one that we submitted, mentions children, youth, and women as vulnerable group. So we have really a good work to do here to make sure that this group of people, especially children and youth and women, of course, are seen as major stakeholders in this. This would involve, of course, very broadly consulting young people in the NDC process. Yes, just to say that the government are showing some openness to collaborate on this. We've had some semi-formal conversation around this, and there's a willingness to collaborate on this. There are areas also that needs to be addressed in the NDCs beyond just including young people as major stakeholders. There are some discrepancies with the NDC and what the government says in some places. For example, in the first NDCs, the targets to end gas flaring is written as 2030. But in the last years, the government has been promising to end gas flaring in Nigeria in 2020. So we have to reconcile this kind of discrepancies in the NDC. Of course, the government would want to go with the target that allows them more time, but it's our job to push them through to make sure that, for example, that gases are not flared for even one more year, because it's killing a lot of people in the country. And then there are also some areas where, of course, we are interested in, especially for me, for example, there should be interest in developed countries, NDCs, for example, the UK. I would explain this, how it relates to Nigeria. I'm just using the UK, for example. If the UK is developing their NDCs of what they want to do or how they want to reduce their emission, they should also consider what their private sector is doing in developing countries or elsewhere. For example, in Nigeria, the oil companies that are flaring these gases are from Europe, or from the UK, from Netherlands, and elsewhere. So if they are reducing their emissions in their home country, how also are they working to reduce their emissions abroad, their influence abroad? But this is a very big component. And how is it to be accounted for? Is it going to be accounted by the country of origin or the country where the investment is? So this kind of interest should be in the NDCs, and this is also something we're trying to push to the governments to be able to understand. Next slide. And so the proposal, which we've just been shared with a few youth organizations here, and also trying to get approval from our partners on this, is that we have this one virtual signature session, with a lot of youth groups on board to discuss this NDC. And following that, the first virtual session will have 2 to 3 weeks online consultation and recommendations, like just an open document where everybody would have their inputs. And then once we're able to get reasonable agreement on these inputs, we can be able to submit this to the ministry and be able to also brainstorm possible implementation of some kind of a permanent platform to engage the government to make sure there is tracking of this initiative. In the Sparkblue this discussion we've been having, there's been a lot of conversation about how to track the NDCs. That's one of the things that came up, and it's something very important, and there needs to be a mechanism on how to do that. I know some of my colleagues in Nigeria, some of them are on this call, who are working to establish some kind of youth climate council in the country to make sure that this mechanism stays beyond the NDCs, to be able to track and bring other innovations on board. And then awareness and knowledge building is very key, because I was able to do some discussion last week with one of the groups in Nigeria, one of the leading youth climate groups in Nigeria, Climate Wednesday, where they are doing an initiative that is tagged Know Your NDCs, because people don't even know about this. There are a lot of activists in the country, but then they need knowledge to understand, what is the NDCs, how does it affect them, why is it important for them to engage? So that's, I was very happy to be part of that conversation. Maybe next slide, so I can show that. So I was very happy to be part of this conversation, just to kick it off, to talk about the NDCs and what it means, why it's important that young people engage in this. This was just a tweet chat, and they did really fantastic work. The team that organized this, they collated all the tweets and made a summary of them, in an article, and it's there for everyone to read and see, how the conversation went. And this is very important. It could be a small effort, but it's very important in making sure that people are aware of what the NDCs are and how they should engage in them. Very important that we have built this awareness because it's not existing, especially in a country like ours. Next slide. And then also during the e-consultation on Sparkblue, one of the questions I found very interesting, or I asked one of the respondents was, are there topics that are specific to youths for NDCs? My personal view is that youths are involved in all the topics. They should be mainstreamed in everyone, but could there be ones that are, much more specific or much more urgent for them? Yeah, we could look at things like the ACE, the Action for Climate Empowerment, climate education, because this is really important. In Nigeria, we have a lot of internally displaced persons camp, a lot of refugee camps, and some of the kids here have not been to school in 4 or 5 years, and it portends a lot of danger. Some of them are displaced by flooding, some by insecurity, sometimes induced by climate change, some pushed away from their communities by excessive drought and encroaching, desertification. So a lot of climate education needs to come into place, especially girl child education in here. Other components of ACE, public engagement, awareness, capacity building. Also climate and security. I am a big proponent of talking about this climate and security because it's something that is affecting a lot of countries in West Africa, where of course it's very popular that we know about the Lake Chad shrinkage, but then the consequent effect, how it has, stripped people of their livelihood, how it has made it easier for some terrorist groups to operate and even recruit people, and even the clashes we have sometimes in Nigeria, where you have like the herders and the farmers who are clashing over resources like grazing fields, because maybe the grazing fields in the northern part of the country are drying up because of drought. These clashes result in a lot of insecurity, and it's a big issue. Sometimes it's not discussed in the context that presents it as climate induced, but it is what it is, because I see that very clearly. Also, technology transfer, agriculture and green businesses, climate migration is also a big deal. I know it has a lot of sensitivity, especially in international negotiations, because we don't want to, because some member states want to avoid some additional responsibility, especially when you call them refugees, but it is what it is. We can't run away from these things. There is climate migration going on. If people need examples, they can come around, we'll show them here. It exists, and we have to have conversation about this. And why it's important is because it affects young people, women and children. And this is why, if you're thinking of a reason why young people should be involved in the NDCs, these are the reasons why, because they know how these topics affect them. You need to reach out to them, to be able to get their perspective pretty much. And then of course, gender mainstreaming, adaptation, and climate finance are very, very essential. I will have to mention also that last year during the COP25, we did some very high-level side events, and with UNICEF, where a declaration was signed on improving participation of children and youth, and Nigeria was one of the signatories to that document also. So it's one of the advocacy tools we are going to use to hold the government to account that you signed this document, and yeah, we should be implementing. Next slide. And then what's more, what's very important is that we need to involve young people in design, planning, content, and implementation of all NDC processes. This is extremely important. We need to also mainstream this, of course, through the UNDP NDC Support Programme and the Climate Promise. I think one way, is on how to do these things. Maybe you want to do a note verbal to member states to say do and that in this way, or through your country offices, but just, thinking aloud, you can always have your way around it. But it's very important that member states know that youth engagement is really, really important in this. Developing countries should get more attention, because youth engagement in most developing countries are supremely tokenistic, and that is just being very mild with it. So it's very important that the essence of meaningful youth engagement, is well spelled out and understood by these countries, that they are not just engaging young people because it's fancy to put them on the table, but they're engaging them meaningfully, and that their opinion or their thoughts would pretty much count in the long run. And of course, yeah, there are other regional, sub-regional schemes to engage, maybe the African Union, EU, just to make sure that partnerships are very much in sync across board. And yes, the COP26 presidency, I've had kind of a couple of calls with them, and they seem quite, quite good, very energetic or very motivated to do a lot of things. So they could also be very useful in championing these to parties. I think party-to-party conversation always is very key. They tend to listen to themselves a lot more. So I think that will also be something that we may want to explore in this regard.
Chair, can we just start wrapping up?
Yeah, sure. Just the next one then. I'm done then. So much.
Thank you, Chiagozi. This is amazingly comprehensive. Thank you, Martin. No, I mean, what sticks with me certainly is the focus that you place on accountability. And I think it's not that different from the conversations that we're having in the context of the 2030 agenda with the VNR, in the context of the conversation on how to track commitments around youth, peace, and security. It'd be really great to have a dedicated session, I think, on youth-led accountability, specifically to compare notes and explore further. On climate and security, this is really a very good point. I think the danger at the moment in that context is to keep seeing young people as basically affecting security and being potential threats. So we definitely have to be very careful with this particular narrative as well, and not see young people only as vulnerable or as potentially lured into violent groups. So there is a huge challenge also with this next generation of NDCs to emphasize young people as agents of change and as real partners that can receive dedicated funding, that are not a threat here. I think that my sound got blocked, but I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I think that my phone froze. So thank you so much. Now we will move to the last group of speakers. We have Maria Eugenia from UNDP Argentina, who's also sharing her speaking slot with Maxi from the Eco House Argentina, a youth organization and youth movement working on climate in the country. So Maru, over to you.
Thank you very much, Noe. Thank you, Adriana, Martin, Rebecca, for this important opportunity. I would like to tell you that in Argentina, youth organizations have been exponentially increasing their participation on climate action. And at UNDP in Argentina, we have been working with them, considering the importance of their voice and mobilization for accelerating implementation and raising ambition of NDC. In 2019, different dialogues with representatives of youth organizations and government authorities were facilitated by UNDP Argentina in order to contribute to the acceleration of NDC implementation and raising NDC ambition. In addition, it is important to consider that at the end of 2019, the National Congress in Argentina passed a new act on climate change, and that youth organizations were involved in the law building process together with representatives from civil society organizations and the academia. During 2020, as part of the activities for Environmental Educational Week, a workshop targeting youth groups was held to analyze the Climate Change Act. You know, Argentina has been committed and actively participated in the international context and submitted its INDC in 2015 and a revised NDC in 2016. In addition to that, Argentina plans to submit a new revision, and for that reason, Climate Promise initiative is going to add value and help enhance the ambitious working, includes collaboration to ongoing programs, such as NDC Partnership and National Adaptation Plan, for instance. The objective of this activity will be to build capacities and receive inputs from youth groups in Argentina about climate change topics, measures included in each plan, NDC and LTS. Additionally, this activity is expected to enhance youth group sensibilization and act as a multiplier with the many actors involved in this project. Since the work of UNDP in Argentina is with and for the youth movement and its climate action, I would like to give the floor to a very important leader of the youth movement in Argentina, Maxi Masocco. Please, Maxi, I would like to listen to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting us to this dialogue. Thank you, Maria Eugenia. It's an honor to be here, and thanks to my colleagues from around the world for their very interesting insights. I'm Máximo Masocco from Argentina, part of a youth organization called Eco House. We are more than 600 people in Buenos Aires. We work federally through the country with 30 different programs, and we are starting venues in almost every country of Latin America and maybe soon in other continents. And I am also part of a coalition of youth organizations, a federation called Climate Alliance, where we work very hard together to achieve the global and national climate goal. To be quick, I want to highlight the work of youth in Argentina and the region. Double highlight. Last year, around March, youth movements broke into the traditional system and never stopped. We never stopped. Of course, this was a team effort. Some of us worked for many years from civil society, others from state, international organizations, etc. But since last year, something changed. Something moved the ground, and it was one of the legs that was missing. I want to remark this because almost every day everyone talks about youth, but we need to support it because the intergenerational work combining the energy and innovation of the young with experience of the not so young is the key to change. To quantify this small breakthrough, for example, this year is the year with the most environmental legislative bills and projects being presented at all levels of the state in the history of our country. In towns, in states, in National Congress. That speaks of a demand from society. And then that's something we are making right, because they are listening, they are calling us. But here is our key. We are making a multi-strategy. Taking climate and ecological crisis to the streets in Latin America is the basis for demanding in democracy. But we are not satisfied with that. From day one, we are dedicated to propose. So we ask with the strikes and from the streets, but we propose. That is why we meet daily, even Sundays and Saturdays, with all the political parties, all the majors, the ministers, all the representatives of the state. We do not stop. We propose local projects, laws, and most importantly, education. In Argentina, we are starting to make education, environmental education for politicians. And as I said, we are seeing the results, a little light, not all the results we want, but civil society is rising, and we realize that there was something wrong for so long, and now when we get together, it's very difficult that people do not want change. So we are a little bit like hopeful with that. We should do much more around the world that we are doing it, but much more than cried out through social networks and strikes. We youth are prepared, we have ideas, man and woman power, so we have to get involved. And here we also have a key strategy that we do not care about the political party that we are getting together and working with, because we are here for the common good, the basis, without ego, just to get things done. For instance, one of the ideas that came was that we are working very hard on that, is that here in Argentina we have two big parties, Peronism and Macrism. If we want to change those parties and create new ones, we do not have a lot of time, because 50% of the country vote one and 50% the other. So if we are in a hurry, in an emergency, we have to use their platform until there are new ways of doing politics or different parties that represent the world we want to build. They do not represent us, but we don't care. We go, we sit down with them, and we use their tools, their machinery to get things done. And that's a strategy that we can do here. We do not know if all the countries can do it, but for us it's very, very, very important. And also, from our point of view, with the results we are starting to get, is a word that we use a lot called pluralism, that there is more than one way of doing things right, not only one way. And if we need a huge change, we will need to listen all the people. And that's why we are starting to put like all the energy, all the energy from the youth movements in environmental education. That's like a huge depth all around the world. Our colleagues were talking about this, but if we do not do it officially, how are we going to solve one of the greatest crises in the history of humanity without knowing that we are in a crisis? People do not know that we are in a crisis. We want to talk about NDC or do something about that, but how many people, for example, in Argentina, do you think that knows what an NDC means? That's why youth is very important, because till now, for example, the government does not have the man and woman power to do the environmental education we need. The youth is doing it, the social society is doing it, the scientists is doing it. So we need to open doors and give resources to them so they can continue extrapolate this change we need. Because we educate with every breath, with every action, not only in the classrooms. And also, from this part of the world, we, if we do not connect that education with the social issues, it will be very difficult to accomplish the climate goals. In Argentina, just for you to know, 50% of the population is poor. How are you going to talk with someone? I'll tell him he needs to do something about the environment if he or she cannot feed their children. And the other 50% of the country is trying to pay their bills. That's the reality we are immersing. So that's why we encourage a lot local action. It's key for us. It's a keystone. Local solutions based on self-sufficiency, a different economy, circular, collaborative, with sovereign cities, think locally, globally and locally. We realize that we can make our own food in a sustainable way, build differently, develop in a good way. We have the opportunity from this part of the world because we are not developed countries, no? So let's develop doing things right from the start. And I will, just to finish, I would like to thank the UNDP office in Argentina, because we work a lot with them, and they were an example of how we can connect dots. We know a lot of young activists in South America, Latin America, that they work a lot and they do not even know their representatives, not even in a small town. They never get together. They cannot reach them. So maybe UNDP can work as a link to connect people from the government with youth. And to finish, thank you very much for having me, for having us. I work every day in the field hard, and without being innocent and considering all the data we have on the table, I see a light. But as the saying goes, when you pray, move your feet. This is not going to be done alone, and we are in the start of a new era. We are going to work very hard in environmental education from this part of the world. So we invite everyone to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Indeed, and connect the dots. The role that young people can play also in being a bridge in the context of pluralism as well. And would love to debate further on political participation specifically and climate action, the entry points that we could identify, I think, to work with young legislators and young politicians and political activists are many. Thank you very much for the great work you're doing, also to educate older generations, because of course, I mean, education is not a top-down thing. Thank you very much. So we're moving to the next part of the agenda. I'm very worried about time at this point, but I think we will manage. We have four colleagues that will provide very quick updates and reflections after having heard the panel. So we have Emanuela from Italy. Then we will have Maria, because she is part of the Youth Engagement Task Force of the NDC Partnership. So there's an update there. Margaret from OSGAY. We will hear from Samira, and last but not least, Melissa, who is working on this guidance package that we're preparing for our UNDP colleagues on meaningful participation. So over to you, ladies. You have 3 minutes each, and I don't know how we will manage this, but let's try. Thank you.
Thank you, Noella. Thank you, Rebecca. Very happy to be here. Thank you to UNDP and to listen to such a inspiring conversation. As you said, I'm from the Italian Ministry of the Environment, and I will provide you a brief overview on the activities that Italy is leading in the framework agreement with the UK for the COP26. The first one is the Youth for Climate Live series, which is an innovative and dynamic program organized with the support of Connect for Climate and the Office of Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. The program started last June, and it will go on until March 2020. It is addressed to young people, and it has a very innovative structure that foreseen two young moderators. Actually, we have two amazing people, Salina Ahmed and Salina Abraham and Ahmed Dar. And they always host two hell of speakers plus three young speakers. We actually already had Marie-Claire that was in your panel, and your administrator, Akin Steiner. Next event is on August 28 at 10 East time. It will address to driving youth action. And The next webinars will be going on every month. In September, we will have a webinar dedicated to nature-based solution, then one on empowering vulnerable people, and I don't want to reveal a lot because we want to build a little bit the momentum and keep your attention. Another activity that Italy is conducting is the organization of the Youth for Climate event that will be in Milano next year from 28th of September to the 3rd of September. And we are keen to collect all the inputs that we receive from the participation of youth people at the series by the social campaigns and all the other inputs that will be launched during this month. Last, Italy is also engaged for the organization of a pre-section of COP26 that will be always in Milan from the 30th of September to October the 2nd. And we want to have the opportunity to make young people debate with the high-level participants of the COP26. From my side, it's all, and I leave the floor for Maria Stey. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for this inspiring conversation today. So I'm Maria, I'm working in UNDP's youth team, and I'm also representing UNDP in the youth task force of the NDC partnership. The aim of this youth task force is to make recommendations for a youth engagement plan of the NDC partnership. And the NDC partnership has more than 100 members from different countries, international institutions, and non-state actors, and really work to leverage expertise and tools for countries to implement the NDCs. And in UNDP, we are very pleased to support the strengthening of the partnership's youth meaningful engagement. So the Youth Task Force, just to give you a brief update on that, it has been working since June and is currently finalizing proposals for a youth engagement plan of the NDC partnership. And these proposals are being developed on the basis of a consultation with young people and the members of the NDC partnership. Around 500 young people have responded to a survey, and online workshops has been held. Some of the highlights from those consultations are that young people responded that the opportunities to accelerate youth-led climate action, there is really a need for more opportunities for capacity building, for access to funding, and for inclusion in meetings and conferences. Also highlighted were the importance of support from government and international institutions. Some of the barriers that were mentioned were really exclusion from decision-making, discrimination on the basis of age, and access to information. Many recommendations for an engagement plan and how to ensure youth meaningful engagement were raised, but some of those are support to existing and new youth-led organizations and networks in the NDC processes and in the implementation part. Another is strengthen the capacity of partners to meaningfully engage young people in NDC processes and in climate policy. It is to provide access to climate education and to take into account the diversity of young people and to make sure to leave no one behind. Other recommendations were to enhance the representation of young people both in the official delegations and meetings, but also in general to recognize young people as equal partners and as stakeholders. So these were some of the recommendations highlighted in the consultations, and the work will continue. So this was just a brief update on that partnership. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Maggie?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Noelia, for the invitation to join you today. Yeah, my name is Maggie Frado, and I'm here on behalf of the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. And I was also very happy to see my colleague from Italy on the line. As she mentioned, we're working closely on the Youth for Climate Live series, and we're excited that the Italian government has committed to bringing young people directly into conversation with climate change negotiators at the pre-COP event. And we're really aiming through the virtual event series to foster meaningful interactions between high-level speakers and young people who are really leading on climate change and doing climate-related work all over the world. So I was also asked to provide a very brief update from my office as well. We've been talking about the Youth Advisory Group on climate change, which is very exciting. You heard from Paloma earlier. I also saw Vlad on the line. So as you may know, the Secretary General appointed 7 young leaders between the ages of 18 and 28, representing all 5 UN regions, to advise him on his climate-related decision-making, specifically in the context of his revised climate strategy. And so I think it's exciting because it builds on the work both within the UN to meaningfully engage young people, building on the Youth 2030 strategy and building on the successful UN Youth Climate Summit last year, but it also really is a product of young people in the streets and within their institutions, demanding that their governments and the UN itself kind of meaningfully and formally include young people in climate-related decision-making. And this is something that was brought up by previous speakers. And it's been fantastic to see the elevation of the voices and the priorities of young people kind of in these global climate conversations, but it's another matter entirely to kind of give them a formal role in decision-making processes and really be able to take the solutions and the leadership they're providing forward into actual action. So the group will be meeting quarterly with the Secretary General to provide their perspectives, ideas, solutions to scale up climate action. And as I mentioned, help implement the climate strategy, including the 6 climate positive actions that the Secretary General laid out earlier this year to recover better from COVID-19 and the economic crisis. So it's very much will be in this current context, addressing these 2 global challenges we're facing right now. But I hope that you will all follow and support the work of the Youth Advisory Group and stay tuned for more updates. But thank you for inviting me to join you here today.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Samira, and then Melissa.
Hi, thank you so much, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here and to hear from all the young leaders on this call today. I just wanted to briefly mention a little bit more about UNDP's work. As Rebecca had mentioned earlier, we do have the Climate Promise, and we're working very closely on looking at how we can better engage with young people. Beyond just saying that young people are inspiring, we really want to show how can we actually meaningfully engage young people in the NDC revision process. How do we make it more inclusive? How do we incorporate elements of climate justice as well? Bringing all of that together is really important. Through all of the different young speakers today, I was really hearing this sense about education, and not just education for young people. And I think often when we think of youth and education, we're like, oh, we should educate young people. But really, this was a turn on how do you educate governments? How do you educate decision makers and leaders? And how can young people help to do that? And I think that that's a really important role for young people to play as well, and how we can best support them in doing that. And through UNDP's Climate Promise, we work with so many countries, and several are saying more and more how they do want to work with young people, and how can we as UNDP encourage governments to look at that specifically. I know in our most recent consultation, we've been finding out, especially with a lot of islands and small island developing states, that they've been interested in working more with young people from across regions, Bahamas, Dominican Republic, Cook Islands, Niue, Mauritius, and Mauritius just had that horrible oil spill that they've been working through, and young people have been leading on that issue as well. So how can we best work with a lot of these governments? And as Rebecca said, youth are not a monolith. We have to find the ways to meet them where they are. And so a couple of ways that we are also engaging with young people is one through our Mission 1.5 campaign. Anyone can join if you just go to Mission 1, the number 1, point, the word point, the number 5.org. I'll throw it into the chat as well. But we strongly encourage you and all of your colleagues and networks to participate. It's a climate vote and educational game, and it offers you an opportunity to be in the place of a policymaker and decide which climate policy solutions you would like to see, and to learn more about those. We're also developing an educational module around that as well. So please do join that. The results of this game and vote will be shared with leaders, so you will see your that information coming from countries and then shared with governments, which is really important to show those results. And then finally, we are in the very, very early stages of starting to think about the Paris Agreement 5-year anniversary, which is coming up at the end of the year. It's already been 5 years since the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015. And now with COP26 being postponed to next year, there's a gap this year and really, you know, a moment for climate. And we want to take that opportunity to really highlight youth voices, to really showcase what young people are doing, not just in that moment in December, but also in the lead up to that as well. So that's something we're working on very closely, and we look forward to working with all of you on that as well. So I'll leave it at that, but happy to share more later. Thank you.
Noelia, should I go after? Yes, okay, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to everyone for the valuable insights that today were shared. I wanted to maybe focus on just three insights that came to me while listening to all of you. And it's also to share a bit of the reflections that are emerging so far from the development of this guidance that we're preparing within UNDP, which is this guidance to support youth meaningful participation in NDCs and beyond that in climate action in general. So the first point that I think it really echoes with me is that we have to recognize that there's a diversity of forms of participation. And of course we know that because we see youth in many different arenas, from the streets to the UNFCCC COPs. So that might be already obvious, but what I wanted to say about this is that we also have to step away from stereotypes of what is the stereotype of how we see youth participating, and also acknowledge that different forms, new forms are emerging also in relation to the urgency. So for example, we already see cases of youth involving in climate litigation initiatives, and also we see already activism movements being more putting their lives at risk because they already see that they already feel this huge disappointment from how the global policy is going. No? So just to say this, like, of course, we have many different forms of participation, but we cannot just fall in a box and stereotype and just acknowledge one or two. And also that we should not put these different ways of participation in opposition, but rather see how they can articulate. And for example, just referring to the example that Marie-Claire mentioned about this UNDP, the UN, not UN, sorry again, the youth delegate in the official negotiation teams for countries. Then I was also wondering how this form of participation can articulate with other national institutionalized forms of participation, such as youth climate councils, which have more of a role in the national level. No, so it's about articulating many of these spaces. So there's a nice flow of information between many youth that are taking in different arenas. So that's my first point. Then the second one is in relation to, okay, we have different we have different forms of participation, but what is meaningful then? What do we have to take into account in all of these forms of participation? And I'll share 3 points that are emerging from these consultations that I was telling you about. So the first one is about how can we make sure that we, I say we because I still feel part of the youth constituency, but in general, youth, how can youth bring radical narratives and also acknowledge that there's a gap of ambition and justice in the way that NDCs are being prepared and in the way that they are being implemented. So of course, if it's just the traditional way that lacks ambition, then according to some of the young people opinions, this is not meaningful because it's just going in the same direction. So it needs to account also what is compatible with a 1.5 pathway. No, so this is super important. And then the second thing is about, okay, there's many, and we've already many spaces where youth have been invited, but something that echo a lot is that these spaces have to be formal mechanisms, long-lasting arrangements. So basically, how can we institutionalize these spaces for youth? How can we ensure structural arrangements that yes, they stay with youth beyond opportunity for for this person or this other person, no? And I already mentioned like this example of a youth climate council or formal spaces for youth delegate in negotiations, but there are other examples like having a youth in national commissions of planning in countries where some of the NDCs, well, depending on the context of the country, but in some countries this is a multi-sectoral space with many of the sectoral measures are discussed for NDCs, or that was at least the case for the previous round of INDCs, no? So we need to identify these spaces, and actually we have to, as I think it was echoed by a couple of people here, that we have to take into account that there's a whole cycle for the NDC. There's a whole cycle that goes through the design, the planning, the implementation, the monitoring, and holding our governments accountable. So youth can participate in all of that process in different ways, and it's also the NDC is a window of opportunity now, but there are many other climate policy instruments or legal instruments where youth can participate, also following this logic of being engaged at every single stage. And the third thing I want to also about what's meaningful, the third reflection is that participation has to be result oriented, has to have an outcome, and it has to be binding. So it's not just receiving many documents of youth inputs and then, okay, this is so inspiring, we'll just leave it there. But actually many youth said that we would like to see that there's a percentage of that original text that is being taken into account in final drafts of policies, which of course might be related to climate change, but also can be bringing many youth development issues that are being that are in the intersection of the climate crisis and youth development, such as unemployment, education, as has been said, and many others, even health issues or migration issues, I think, like Tiagosi was mentioning. So that's the third reflection for what's meaningful. And my third point, and I'll leave it at that, is that, and also it's been said a lot, which is that we have to stop treating young people as a one group, because of course there's many differences, age difference within that group, but one that is being echoed a lot is that there are different for young people that already enjoy many privileges and young people that is marginalized at many levels. So when thinking about youth participation, we have to kind of turn the ladder around. I don't know if this phrase makes sense, but we have to start with addressing the most marginalized youth and going up there, because if we don't do that, then we're just creating or just making the gap bigger. So yes, that was my last point, and yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share this.
Thank you very much, ladies, for all these updates and reactions. Great to have you, Melissa, also on board to work on this guidance package. It's truly inspiring, and I think will be a game changer. So we're way beyond time. I'm handing over to Martin for the Q&A at this stage. I mean, whoever wants to stay really is welcome to stay. I mean, that's what I can say. If we can stay for 10 to 15 minutes, I'm more than happy to do that. So we will go through all the questions and all the comments in any case, and we will respond in writing and share all the slides and everything. So rest assured that there will be follow-up no matter what. Thank you. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Noella. And yes, colleagues, thank you all for your insights. We are aware that we are beyond time, as just Noella mentioned, but it's also important to allow for some Q&A. So I have reviewed the chat box, and we have a comment from Daisy Murakami and a question from Melina Nathan. So Daisy, if you want to take the floor just really quickly. If you're still here with us.
Thank you, I'm still here. It's just a comment. I think as I wrote in the message box, youth are doing a lot in terms of advocacy. but we want to see youth involved in implementing projects on the ground, in their ability to handle project finances, so that will buttress their advocacy or diplomacy efforts. So we want to see more of photo stories when they advocate for climate change. I think that's the key point. Thank you. I'm glad that Nigeria is doing a lot, like substantive, meaningful input into policies, meaningful input into the NDC revision, and also they are going to look at the post-revision phase. Thank you so much. It's just a comment from a climate person and also a mother, a parent. Thank you.
Thank you, Daisy. A regular question on the logistics side is that if we are going to share the presentation and the recording, of course, we're going to share not just the presentation and the recording, but all the additional material. And as Noella mentioned, a summary of the Q&A with all the written responses. Melina Nathan, I see your question. Can you please unmute yourself and share it with us?
Sure. In the Philippines, you know, the fate of environmental activists, particularly if you happen to also be indigenous, has not been, you know, very positive for the past couple of years, particularly under the current administration. And recently an anti-terrorism law has been passed, has been enacted, and already as many human rights defenders and civil society had feared, it looks as though it's, you know, it's being accompanied by an increase in harassment of activists, even though the law says that there is room for activism and activism is not terrorism. But this is not happening in terms of how security forces are harassing, you know, activists. And I've actually seen meetings where youth who are asking questions very passionately about issues like, you know, ancestral domains with their IPs or their rights to lands, concerns about, you know, development, that they are actually branded on the spot and accused of being, you know, communist sympathizers or members of the Communist Party, which is deemed to be a terrorist organization in the country. So my question really is, how in the run-up to the big event can states be held accountable in terms of providing safe spaces for youth to be actively engaged in this issue without, you know, dealing with these threats? So I mean, I just wanted to raise this because what I've been hearing has been very positive so far, and this is a real danger, you know, in I'm sure quite a number of countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Melina. Noella?
Sure. I mean, Melina, thank you so much for raising this point. We're certainly worried to see the shrinking civic space for young climate activists, for young activists in general, for young peace builders. We see also how the lockdown and the different measures in the context of COVID-19 has sometimes given an additional entry points for that shrinking of civic space or that repression. Without any doubt, I mean, the climate justice, climate change, I mean, is a critical governance, human rights, rule of law issue. I mean, and we see that very, very comprehensively in that context. We have to ensure that there is some safe and inclusive civic spaces, safe spaces for young people to participate, but that we also respect the self-organized, you know, spaces that young people are themselves putting together. There is so much work that needs to be done with national human rights institutions, more that has to be done indeed with security forces to be able to bridge, I mean, this, at best, the mistrust that exists between institutions and young people, but also address this particular issue that you raised. There are a lot of country offices specifically addressing this concern. Typically, I mean, this, I think it would be the topic for an entire chat. I don't know if any young people on the panel would like to reflect specifically about this, because that's a reality in more than one country for sure.
Thanks, Noella. Any quick reaction? Okay, if not, I see a hand raised by Effie. Effie, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Effie. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'm from China, and I have been working on environmental protection related volunteers since I was 15, and I was trying really hard in my country to be a part of environmental activism. But recently, I didn't even know what does NDC means before before the conference. But I have a question for Rebecca. I'm wondering because I just saw a picture about which country participated in the UNDP NDC program, but I saw both China and US didn't. I'm just wondering, as a Chinese international teenager, how can we ask for support from the UNDP or the NDC program? Or in what form the Climate Promise or the UNDP could help the NGOs we established as teenagers, like for example, like providing funds, or we can invite from UNDP or NDC project to China for conferences we youth hold.
Thank you. Over to you, Rebecca.
For that, just to clarify, with Climate Promise, we are engaging with 114 governments who have requested support. That's not to say that China is not going to submit an NDC. They would be anticipated to, but they did not need to use our engagement mechanism for that process. But I think there are important mechanisms by which China is also leading the way, especially I would say in terms of nature-based solutions, which is on an equally important track this year, and climate change. And so, you know, I think that there are ways that we can sort of encourage those narratives. We can certainly explore with you ways that UNDP in China is engaging with CSOs and with youth, and see what the other opportunities are for you. So we will certainly, you know, find a way to connect with you and sort of engage you with our country office so we can explore some options for you that way. Over.
Thanks, Rebecca. We have a request from Parvin. We all can read it in the chat box. He's asking for support and insights on how would you organize a flash mob modern and attractive. You can find the email to send your comments in the chat box. And then we're moving to the two final questions. One is from Alphonse, and the other one is from Tabina that I see a hand raised. So Alphonse, if you can unmute yourself.
Oh yeah, so thank you so much, Martin. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So my concern was about at times in these you know youth spaces that are created within the auspices of the global negotiation on climate issues and so on. Find that yeah, we have spaces that are continuously being created for youth, but a lot of youth are just there. They don't know what they want to engage in specifically. They look confused. In the end of the process, they go home with nothing. So we don't know how best you have in store for capacity building for youth, so that they scale up their diplomacy skills to engage effectively in these spaces. Thank you.
Very good question. Any quick reactions from our panel?
Yes, is it okay to go?
Please.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah, great question, Alphonse. I would say, I mean, from my experience, I've had a very different experience to what you just mentioned, because I mean, last year and of course continuously before then, I have been with this network of young people every year, you know, additionally seeing amazing young people who have even more diplomatic capacity than their member states bring to the table in negotiations. So Of course, capacity needs to be built every year with more young people coming into this space afresh, but there's no shortage of capacity in terms of capable young people across board who are able to do things off now. There are lots of young people who were in their country delegations for the last COP, were probably the most active negotiators, at the COP, and their countries really felt, their impact, and they want to keep them on the official delegation of the country. Yeah, but what I can say is that capacity needs to be built continuously for new people coming into the space to be able, to have that knowledge transfer of the older ones. But then currently we have very solid group of young people who can always deliver anytime.
Thank you, Chiagosi. And time is always a constraint. So Tabina, you have the last question, and then we can wrap up this session. I don't think we can hear you. Can you try just one last time?
Yes, sir, I will try.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Sir, I am a young graduate student and I know the devastating effects of the climate change. I want to ask you a single question that from UNDP program, along with other major programs, can we have a campaign there so that the single-use plastic should be banned worldwide? Because it has the devastating effects on soil, water, our resources. And this space have you created for us, small young generation, and what are the ways which will lift us up so that our voice can be heard? So.
Thanks, Tabina. Just regarding plastics, let me let you know that UNDP is building a UNDP Global Plastics offer, and soon we will start a conversation, a public electronic discussion about this. So I think the best way to go and to start, the starting point, is to participate in that consultation that will be available soon on Sparkblue. Any other quick reaction from our panelists? Okay, if not, Hassan, I see you have a hand raised. Unfortunately, we have reached the limit. We are beyond the time allowed for this session. I would appreciate if you can write down your question into the chat box so we can provide a written answer afterwards and share with all of you. And with that, I am passing to Noella just for wrapping up, and thank you all for this incredible session. This is not the end of the conversation, but just an entry point for having a continuous one. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you very much, Martin. Perhaps we can put the next slide. So just to remind you of this consultation that we mentioned, feel free to join, and even if we're close to the end of this online consultation, the membership that would have been constituted in this context, will remain. So that's just really also a community of practitioners that we want to keep alive beyond it. And next slide, last but not least, we mentioned that International Youth Day is tomorrow. The theme is youth engagement for global action, very relevant to a lot of the work that you're doing and your passion, etc. Please feel free to visit the link and have a look at all the events that are taking place on a broad range of issues, from climate action to counterterrorism to governance issues, SDG work, etc. So please stay engaged, and count on us also to indeed put you in touch with our UNDP country office whenever possible, and to find every opportunity to connect you to the work that is ongoing at country level, and to connect the dots, as some of you said. I really want to thank very warmly our panel, fantastic contributions, fantastic presentations, our key listeners and colleagues and partners that joined. Thank you very much, Martin, for hosting us with the community of practice, and we will be sending you all this material and stay in touch. So please continue to follow us on social media and on Sparkblue, and we will stay in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Noella, and all. I am just about closing this session, but before that, please all that unmute yourselves and put your cameras on so we can say goodbye in our own languages. So See you. Adios.
Au revoir.
Gracias.
Adeus. Ciao.
Luma. Luma.
This concludes the session. Thank you, everyone. Adios.